Okay, take 24 at this point. I don't know why, but just the way circumstances have been, every time I've tried to record a video on this topic, my camera like battery died. I tried doing it during lunch numerous times, or like the audio was bad because I was outside and there's just all this wind, or I've ever tried recording it in the morning, but then it's kind of busy or whatever the case is. Just something seems to always happen. So this one hopefully is a good take. I'm talking about maybe just end up doing like a YouTube live thing, not because anyone will actually watch at my 4 o'clock in the morning thing. Uh, but at least it'll just be pushed straight to YouTube. So, anyways, I digress. Let's continue here. So, doing work for your family or friends. So I had somebody ask in the comment section, and I apologize. I've really tried to do this numerous times. It's been on my radar, but then I just keep switching topics. And I'm like, okay, maybe that one's just not whatever. Anyways, so I don't know if I'm gonna use her name. So, but I was asked, what are your thoughts on doing a project for family? Expectations, guilt, emotion that usually comes with that. So, here's the thing about doing projects for family. So, probably a quick disclaimer. Um, I personally have not done any projects for family or friends in the field of web development. I think it's just because I'm newer and people just haven't actually had to call on me for that service yet. Um, so it might end up happening a little bit with maybe like later, like I don't know, but it is likely to happen. And so I will tell you exactly what the process is that I'm going to be using when that day does come. Um, and then in regards to my previous life, when I was working for myself, doing character animation and motion graphics work, that was never really a skill set that was a requirement for any family or friends for any of their businesses. Although I have made like little logos and that kind of stuff, but I think that hardly qualifies for the purpose of this kind of topic and what she's leaning towards. So let me cover a couple things. So the first thing is when you're working for family and friends, the first thing you're probably wondering about this sort of mindset is because unlike a normal stranger client, and the reason why you're probably asking about this specifically is because it's probably an early client, one of your first clients, right? And there's a lot of weight that comes with your first client. You want to do a good job, and you think you can get stuff for your portfolio and all this stuff. On top of that, with family and friends, you have a relationship with them, something that you don't have with a client. You have a history, you understand them, and you know them, and if they're asking for your help, or they're allowing you for to help out or whatever the case is, you have you're on good terms with them, right? You have a credibility, and credibility in the business world is super important. Okay, so there's a couple things that you should probably keep in mind. First of all, when you're doing this project, you want to think about keeping the business separate from the personal life. Okay, and this isn't to be harsh. This is actually just smart, basic business practices. It sets your credibility up even higher as a professional in the field, as well as helps protect the both of you, mainly from emotional damage. Which is the biggest thing. If you haven't had a client before in the freelance world, one thing you will discover rather quickly is things usually start off very well, but everybody's different, and especially when it comes to things that involve paying for services, you know, um, sometimes there's a question on how much value they're getting, and if what they're getting is the normal or fair, or if they need more. You'll commonly get a bunch of revisions, constant changes, and things will start to become outside the scope of the project, of the original project, if you haven't clearly defined what the project scope is. So, for example, what I'd recommend is just going online, looking up like, freelance contract generator. There's a bunch of tools out there, and all you need is a basic contract. It's one you should be using for all your clients if you're going to be doing freelance stuff. But specifically, The reason why you just need something basic on paper, it establishes a clear communication between some basic parameters. Hang on. So it establishes some basic parameters. So with that, the basic parameters would include things like how big is the scope of the project? Is it a day? Is it a few days? Is it a week? A couple weeks? Is it a few months? I'd recommend for family to try and stay within the scope of less than a month, or a month max. And whatever you think the duration of time is that you will need, add on a week or two. And the reason why I argue that is because, once again, if it is one of your early clients, you are going to realize that there is usually more time needed because of revisions, changes, just the evolution of the project, that your initial estimation is usually going to be wrong, especially when you're not used to estimating these things all the time. Okay? The other reason why I say under a month is because when you're under a month, anything under a month, you can kind of keep the scope and control it. The moment you start getting outside of that scope of a month, things start to drag, start to get pulled. There starts to become, especially if you're like on a fixed budget or whatever the case is, but things start to get pulled and dragged and stretched out, and the criteria seem to be more wishy-washy. Things you should put inside this contract, very basic, right? Things like, if you're being compensated, how you're being compensated. I would still recommend some sort of small monetary payment. It doesn't have to be like a normal rate or anything, but by having some sort of small monetary payment in there, what you're doing is you kind of put you both in the same mindset. They're going to treat you a little bit different when they're going to pay for your service, and you're going to act a little bit different because you know that you're being paid for this service. Okay, I do have a separate video where I talk about not working for experience, and with family and friends it's a little bit different, but because what you're trying to do is you're going to go above and beyond the scope of the normal project. Okay, normally when I was talking about that, I was referring to the fact that sometimes you'll have a client and they'll want you to work for experience, but you're not really interested in whatever it is they're making, right? You're not going to have a passion to put into it. You're going to get the job done and do a good job. The thing is, with your family and friends, you have a different kind of investment in them. You want them to succeed. You want to be able to bring them to a whole nother level, and you want to be able to do the best of your abilities and go above and beyond that because you want them to be successful. And they're of course thinking the same thing, like they want to help you out, they want to grow your portfolio, and they think they're doing you a solid and all that stuff. So with all that being said, what you really want to do is you're putting in all this extra effort in, you are going to get something a little bit extra out of it, being that you have something even nicer to present for your portfolio. I would still say to throw in some sort of small monetary value in there, even if it's like $50, for something that would normally cost a couple hundred or whatever the case is. Just, it's up to you how you want to do it. I'm just saying it does change things a little bit, and then it kind of gives you an idea for how you would prefer in the future to do payment systems. Would you like milestones? Would you like, one fixed cost at the end? Do you want to be paid hourly? If you are going to do any of these criteria, what is, how do you define these milestones? How do you define the scope of the project? Also I recommend inside the contract, putting something that sort of dictates what is the completion of the project. What is the end? Is it, I recommend having two things. One, have a hard deadline. Say, in the contract, like if by this date, yada, 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 yada is complete, no further revisions are permitted, or if this thing has been done, then it is complete, right? You need a definition for what is the completion of the project. And that should be with all clients. And the reason why you even have this paperwork, to be honest with you, it's not because you're going to sue anybody or anybody's going to, run out on you. Once again, it's really about that mindset, and that mindset changes everything, especially if you're trying to make this a learning experience. The other thing that it does is it just helps both you and them out. You shouldn't feel bad if you're asking for your payment for completing a portion of the milestone. People people are very attached to when they sign something with their name. You're only as good as your word. And what ends up happening is when you sign something, you stick to it, right? It could be on a napkin, for crying out loud. It can be on a napkin. But at the end of the day, what ends up happening is people will be like, that's my name. That's my credibility. I said I would do this. I've signed my name. You hold me accountable. And that's really what it is. It's basically putting the client and holding them accountable. you know and family and friends, regardless, you still want to go through these basic practices. The relationship with family and friends is different, and because of that you want to be extra careful, just because really what you want to do, and I've seen this happen, and I definitely know people who this has happened for. You really want to avoid straining the relationship, the personal relationship you have with the individual, because that's just going to happen. It's going to happen if things are not clearly defined. There's going to be stress with the project. There's going to be things that are unclear, and then there's constant revisions and changes, and you don't want that to get away from you to the point where now on a personal level there's some conflict, because that's really none of this has ever been about. You and the other party have been about trying to help each other out. You both care about each other. You both want the best for each other. That's important that you clearly make that separation between the business side and the personal relationship side. Okay. So like a really good example of this is actually, so me and my family, my wife and my son, we live actually with my best friend and his family, in their house. And when we made this agreement and this arrangement, we made two separate pieces of legislation. One piece is your basic bare bones dry cut contract. It just stipulates how much is it a month, what we're splitting, how we're doing this, all the financial stuff, right? All the business, boring, not personal stuff. It's hard coded in stone. This way, there's very clear parameters that I'm held accountable to, and they shouldn't feel bad if it's the end of the month. I need to make a payment for something, right? That you shouldn't have to feel that way when you're with a contract, or if you're doing freelance work. You shouldn't feel bad asking your client for a payment for your services rendered. Okay. Now, on the other hand of that, what we did is we also made a second piece of legislation we called the friendship agreement. And that was something personal that we put together with stipulations about things we would do as friends and we were reminded of as friends, and continuing our faith and all that stuff. And so we put that into a different piece of legislation so that we had a personal side and a business side, and we wanted to keep those separate. And so far things been good on it. So with that, I don't know if you also want to do a friendship agreement, but really the big thing is going to be the cut bones dry piece of legislation, that is a contract. Okay. So like I said, some sort of monetary payment I'd recommend, but if that's not the case, if you really feel like, hey, listen, man, this project is too small, it's gonna take me like a few days, that's fine too. Just put in there whatever it is you're being compensated with. If it's a recommendation, if it's just a portfolio piece, whatever the case is. If it is something that you're going to be doing for them strictly as a portfolio piece for yourself, and that's what you're getting out of it, then I would be extra clear on what you would define as complete. What can also happen sometimes is sometimes clients don't know what looks good. You're basically entering an artistic field. I don't care what anybody says. Web development is an artistic field, and the functionality, how things work, best practices. You are the one who's the professional in this field. It is on you to communicate that what's best for this particular layout, design, GUI, whatever. and what is common trends right now, or good colors or whatever. What has happened, even at my current job, there was a site that we worked on, beautiful site, really good, nice contrasting colors and layouts. And long story short, they changed their logo color, and we ended up changing the site to a very monotone throughout the site, and it's what they wanted, right? At the end of the day, it's what the client wants. But that's something where, as an example, the site looks degraded, and we don't even use it as a portfolio presentation wise anymore, because we don't really want to be associated with that site. So in this case, if it's something you're using for your portfolio, you want it to look good. You want it to look good and amazing by your standards, you as the artist, you as the web developer. Because if you're doing it for your portfolio, you know what you want to show in your portfolio. You know what you want to demonstrate for your portfolio. And depending on what the scope of that project is, try and fight for that a little bit harder. So, or keep a separate version of it that does look the way you want it to. That's always an option too. But so anyways, so yeah, those are the kind of things to think about. Expectations. Set the expectations also very clear. Verify and clarify for them that, hey, normally this is what I would do. But for you, because I love you, you're like family, you're like the friends, you're all that stuff, right? We're going to, bring it up, right? Normally I do this, but for you, I'm going to bring it up here, okay? Because the thing is, which you also find with clients, there isn't a base to compare it to. They don't know what is the norm, right? And if you don't say anything, they will take it that you're doing the minimum. Once again, family and friends maybe aren't going to make the same assumption, but you should really be in the mindset of this is just a normal freelance client. People will assume the minimum, that you're doing the minimum versus the most, right? Because at the end of the day, like, basic economics is, how can you do as little as possible and make as much as possible? That's just economics 101. And what ends up happening, so with this, I would, you always with the client clarify what is entailed within the project, what services you're going to provide directly. Give them an idea of what the base is, right? Say, normally this kind of site would cost this much. Normally I only have to do this. Normally I don't integrate this because it's so much involved with this. I mean, give them a scope, a sense, right? It does a couple of things. It also not only establishes your credibility, but it also gives them some perspective. And really, with all clients, you want to give a sense of perspective, because they don't know. They're not web developers. They don't know how long a website makes, how long a website takes. When I was doing, working for myself, doing character animation, one thing that would happen all the time is people would ask me for work like Pixar. They would want a rendering like Pixar. And I explained to them that production studio, that level of quality is possible. It's just more expensive and more time consuming. And the majority of the time, obviously, they didn't need that. They weren't even requiring that. But they don't know. They don't know that, people would typically ask me, oh, I want, a 30-minute pilot, 30-minute pilot episode. Cool. And I want it done like Pixar. And then they'd be like, oh, well, 30 minutes, what is that, like, an hour, maybe 2 hours, right? Or people would ask for like a 2-minute commercial, thinking, well, 2 minutes of real time is probably like, what, 15 minutes of work, 20 minutes of work? It sounds funny, but the reality is this is how people think, and it's not their fault. Like, they are not in your field. They are not professionals in this field. They are not experts. That's why they're coming to you, because they need an expert. They need somebody who can do that skill set and who is familiar with that field. So, yeah, like I said, you shouldn't have to worry about feeling guilty or having emotions about, all of this. By all means, help out your family and friends. There's nothing wrong with it. Just to protect that relationship, I strongly advise putting in the paperwork, just because it sets a precedence, and really at the end of the day, it's going to be, don't think of it about a financial protection. Think of it about a protection for your relationship with one another. Okay, like I said, I've seen too many times people get into personal squabbles over stupid stuff, and you don't want that to happen. Okay, I've seen it happen, so I'd strongly recommend just, it takes like 10 seconds on Google, and the other party is not going to be offended by it. Okay, with clients, family, friends, freelance, people you just met on the street, nobody's offended by a contract. Nobody's offended by an NDA. By the way, NDAs are just ridiculous. Like, that's another thing I should probably talk about at some point. But you know, it's okay. Anyways, but yeah, nobody's gonna be offended because you're asking for a contract. Nobody's gonna be offended if you want to clearly define things, and if they're a little bit uncomfortable with it, just clarify, like, oh, this is just, for clear definitions, so that in a month from now, or in a few weeks, we both know the project is complete and done. And it would make me feel more comfortable, and I'm trying to get into these practices. I'm trying to do this practice, and get through all that. Like, if you can pretend and help me learn, they'll be much more accepting of that kind of approach also. So it really shouldn't be an issue, and it shouldn't be. So I think I pretty much covered up, I think, my thoughts on this topic. If you do have any questions about this topic or a different topic, or you have a topic that you think you would like for me to answer via one of these things, I will throw it in my queue, and at some point it will show up. Once again, my apologies, this video took so long to make. It's just really weird. Anyways, thank you for watching, guys. Leave a comment down below, whatever it is your thoughts are, or whatever it is that you want me to make a video on. Always looking for new ideas, new topics. Okay, great. Thanks, guys. Have a nice day. Need to stop the video.